Hi, this is Miss Hepworth, and I just thought I would share some resources with you about cells. Normally, when I start the cell unit, I actually show this video by Harvard University. Essentially, it gets at how life within a cell is so dynamic. There are so many different processes going on that make living things work, either at the unicellular level up to the multicellular level. So I'm going to play just a little of this video for you to see uh, what is inside of a cell. Hopefully by the end of this unit, you can go back to this video and hopefully identify some of the different organelles. So here it is, the inner life of a cell. Hopefully you like that video. It's one of my favorites in regards to showing just how dynamic cells are. But let's actually talk about what a cell is. It is the basic unit of life. When we talk about matter, the basic unit of matter we call atoms. But essentially for a cell, it is the smallest existing entity that where life can exist. So we'll talk about throughout this unit a unicellular organism versus a multicellular organism. I'm going to show you a few slides right now about cell theory. So just what scientists have come up with as far as the defining characteristics as far as what a cell is and what a cell isn't. All right, so looking here, okay, as I said before, a cell is the smallest structural and functional unit of an organism. So like I said, the smallest unit of life. Most cells are you're unable to see using the naked eye. You have to use a microscope. That's not true for all cells. An egg cell, a chicken egg, essentially is one of the larger ones that obviously you don't need a microscope to see that. Within a cell, it contains cytoplasm and a nucleus enclosed in a membrane. And if you look off to the right here, there are different types of cells. So eukaryotic cells are going to be membrane-bound cells. So they have a nucleus, and then all of the organelles. They're called organelles because they're essentially like little organs. If you think of a cell as a person, within a person you have different organs that have different functions that keep the body alive. Well, a cell is very similar in that way, that there are little organs called organelles within it that help keep the cell functioning. In a eukaryotic the cell, all of those organelles are membrane bound, and there's a nucleus at the center. A prokaryotic cell, so like a bacterial cell, is not going to have membrane bound organelles. It's going to have a very different structure than a eukaryotic cell. So as it says here, two types of cells, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. I'm going to just go briefly into this. I find it really interesting to know kind of the history. Robert Hooke in 1665 looked at cork trees, okay, using a microscope. And essentially he came up with this whole idea of a cell, that it looked like almost like a prison cell, like where things were divided up into these smaller structures. I guess here they said it looks like a monastery instead of a prison cell, but just really that there were these features of living tissue that were divided up into these little block-like structures called cells. But he didn't really know what they were or what they would do. This scientist, Leeuwenhoek, oh man, I probably didn't say that name right, but essentially looked at single-celled organisms, bacteria and protozoa, and observed red blood cells to really look at the differences between the two. And Schleiden, okay, looked at plant cells. Plant cells and animal cells are going to have a lot of similar organelles, but there's going to be some key differences in their structure that we'll highlight a little bit later in the unit. Also notice the importance of the nucleus. And then Schwann, okay, was another scientist, concluded that all animal cells are composed of cells too. So essentially this idea of cells create tissue, and we'll get to this later. Tissue create organs, organs create organ systems create organisms. So the cell theory itself, okay, all cells are composed of cells. All organisms are composed of cells, and cells are the basic unit of life. Okay, and then another component or idea that supported this by Virchow proposed that all cells resulted from the division of pre-existing living cells. So you can't spontaneously have life happen. So these thoughts, this theory, had multiple scientists throughout time working on it for our current understanding of what cells are. Once again, for the cell theory, all organisms are composed of cells. Cells are the basic unit of life, and cells come from the division of pre-existing cells. All right, I'm going to show you just one more thing before we leave off for today. I think you'll enjoy just seeing the different size relationships between different living things. Just one moment while I get that up. I'm back, and you probably didn't notice that I was gone for that long, but I want to show you this interactive as far as just seeing size relationships between various living and in this case, non-living things. So let's get to it. So we have a coffee bean, we have Times New Roman font, you have a sesame seed, a grain of salt. Okay, and if you see the measurement here, this is in millimeters. And if you see the size relationship over here throughout while we move through this interactive, that'll give you even more ideas about the size relationships. So we'll zoom in more. So to that grain of salt, 0.5 millimeters. Okay, and then we see a few structures here. We have a human egg cell. Okay, we have a paramecium and an amoeba. Both of these are unicellular organisms that you can see underneath a microscope. And you zoom in a little bit further, you see a skin cell, a sperm cell, oops, sorry about that, a skin cell, okay, a sperm cell, a photoreceptor, that would be within your eye, so a special cell within your eye, a red blood cell, okay, 8 micrometers small, and X chromosomes. We'll talk about chromosomes within the DNA. Essentially, that's the genetic material that makes you who you are. Baker's yeast, okay, how small that is. And then we get into actually some organelles right here in bacteria. So a lysosome, it's going to break down different components within this cell and digest it. Mitochondria is going to be the energy producing part of a cell. We'll talk about that one a little bit later. And then E. coli bacteria, it's bacteria that's commonly present in feces, and it's pretty abundant. Then we have the measles virus. So if you see here, these viruses that we've been talking about are really pretty small. HIV, we'll go in a little bit further. Hepatitis virus, rhinovirus is like the common cold, okay? And then we get into some protein sort of here, transferred tRNA, hemoglobin, antibodies, okay, that help with our immune system, fighting off various things, pathogens in our body. And then we have phospholipids, glucose, and then these are a part of our genetic structure, amino acids. Then we get to water molecule, and then carbon atom. So this kind of shows a whole gamut of living things down to the size of a single carbon atom. So hopefully you like this. Feel free to check it out. This interactive was done by University of Utah. So I thought this was fun. I'll try to include a link for you guys to explore this some more. All right, I think this is it. I now leave you to working on today's lesson. Once again, have a great rest of the day, and text me, email me, get in touch if you have any questions. Thank you. Bye.